BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello, everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? I hope everyone had a good weekend. In this episode, I will be examining a new proposed solution to the Zodiac Z32 cipher, one that is connected to the Zodiac's Oakland A's tickets, bringing back the Zodiac Killer Debunking series, and continuing the discussions with the book The Cases That Haunt Us. First, I would like to remind you guys that for the summer, I am going live on YouTube on Tuesdays and Thursdays. True Crime Talk Radio in the morning, available here on YouTube, and that will be at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time when the live streams start, and those discussions are mostly just going to focus on general things related to the true crime world, lots of stuff about forensics, criminology, and of course criminal psychology, and in the most recent live stream, somebody went a little bit overboard in the chat, sending out hundreds of messages and so on, and believe it or not, that's not an issue. I mean, because when I go live on YouTube, the focus of the episode is that I am going to respond to people in the chat. I'm going to be talking about things that are true crime related, and people can respond to them. Simultaneously, this person was also spamming my inbox on Facebook, sending multiple messages. I don't even know how many. And again, that's not an issue. I just muted the person so I wouldn't get the notifications. But after the live stream, somebody just left a comment, someone who was watching the episode later on, and then this person decided to do the same thing, sending 7 replies, I kid thee not, sending 7 messages to this person just in the comments section here on YouTube, and ultimately I decided that that was too much, and that user is now banned from this channel. Because, as I said, I can respond to people during a live chat, and I can ignore messages on Facebook, but that final thing, just sending countless messages to people who are just trying to watch and listen to the show and respond, that's just harassing the audience. And ultimately, that type of behavior is not welcome here on Black Box Online Radio. Engaging in discussions and conversations, absolutely welcome. Harassment is not. And I know that 99% of you understand that. It's that radical 1% that does not. But I would like to continue with the discussions on the book, The Cases That Haunt Us, because that's what I was discussing on the Thursday live stream. It is written by John Douglas, who is the pioneer of FBI psychological profiling. And during the live stream, I was talking about a lot of his observations about the Zodiac Killer. If you get to read the book, The Cases That Haunt Us, there's a very large section that is devoted to the Zodiac. And I actually chose to do a multi-part discussion on this book because I was following the news about the Long Island serial killer suspect Rex Heuermann, who is now in custody, and when they raided his home, they found out that he was somebody who had a copy of John Douglas's book, The Cases That Haunt Us. And I would like to go back to 1966 with the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, because I talked a lot about John Douglas and the Zodiac Killer on the live stream, but he has several pages that are dedicated to the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, who is a possible Zodiac Killer victim. And Sherry Jo Bates was murdered on October 30th of that year, 1966. Some people believe that she was the first victim of the Zodiac, and John Douglas is more or less going to agree that that was the Zodiac by the end of his section. But he has a very bizarre set of ideas that are connected to Sherry Jo Bates's murder. She is stabbed multiple times, dozens of times, but he developed this idea that she was murdered by somebody whom she was acquainted with, but she was not killed by somebody who had a deep connection to her, a very strong connection to her. And I thought that was very bizarre because just prior to my live stream on Thursday, I was watching a video from John Douglas on Meet the Authors TV, available on YouTube, and he was discussing another case where there was a stabbing, and that was the 1994 murder of Nicole Brown Simpson, saying that, oh, absolutely, the killer had a very close personal connection to her. Firstly, she's stabbed with a knife as opposed to a different method of execution, such as gunshots or being run over by a car. Secondarily, the killer then not only stabbed her multiple times, but also slashed her across the throat and nearly decapitated her. And when I was just reading his section in the book about Sherry Jo Bates, I was just thinking, now wait a second, Sherry Jo Bates was stabbed multiple times. The killer also slashed her across the throat and nearly decapitated her. Why would you think that it's a close personal connection with the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson? but not with the murder of Sherry Jo Bates. And John Douglas does provide some explanations for that in the book, and a big reason is because after the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, again, she's murdered in October of 1966. In November of 1966, we have the Riverside confession, where somebody wrote a typed letter that was mailed that said that they were responsible for the Bates murder, saying that Miss Bates was stupid, she went to the slaughter like a lamb, and that beware, I'm stalking your girls now, he's going to go after different women. And this is something that John Douglas is incorporating in the psychological profile of the Bates killer. Firstly, she's called out by name, and the killer, or the person who wrote the Riverside Confession, stated directly that this person knew Sherry Jo Bates and that he was somewhat acquainted with her. He knew her name, and he knew that she was a student at RCC, the Riverside City College, and that he had been observing her for some time, and that she had given him brush-offs in the past. Now, this is the problem that I had, though. He's accepting that every detail that the person wrote in this confession must be 100% accurate. We don't really know it is. People tell lies, right? So he's just saying that he's not an ex-boyfriend. And also, this is the more important thing. This is the difference between the Nicole Brown Simpson murder and the murder of Sherry Jo Bates. And that is that the person who wrote the Riverside Confession said, beware, I'm stalking your girls now. Maybe I'll go after the shapely brunette or the blonde that babysits, something to that effect. In the Riverside Confession, the killer says that he wants to go after women. He wants to murder multiple women over a period of time. In short, this person is saying that he either is a serial killer or he's going to become a serial killer. That would mean that Sherry Jo Bates was not targeted purely because she had a personal connection to the victim, not a revenge killing, not someone who was mad because she had broken up with him, someone like the suspect Bob Barnett, who was an ex-boyfriend. Instead, this is somebody who was a growing serial killer, and that he had animosity toward women, not specifically Sherry Jo Bates, whereas according to John Douglas, on Meet the Authors TV, the person who committed the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson, a lot of people think that that was O.J. Simpson, that person targeted her because of a specific personal reason. And when he laid it all out like that, let's say, if the Riverside Confession actually was written by the killer, and as of now, I think that it was. I mean, I don't see any reason to believe that that was not the killer. This person was doing this because he wants to target women, and women are what's important to him. And this is something that John Douglas would incorporate into his psychological profile of the Zodiac killer, because he's going to say that the Zodiac killer is not super focused on the victims. The Zodiac killer wants to be a murderer. And yes, John Douglas will think that Sherry Jo Bates was a victim of the Zodiac. He also looked at the Kathleen Johns incident and is incorporating a bunch of unconfirmed things into his psychological profile, even the saying that the 1978 letter is authentic. And I talked about all of that on the live stream, so I don't want to redo everything. But this is some stuff that is, well, it's very important because no matter what, though, I followed his assessment about the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, and then in 1968 we have the Zodiac killer coming into his persona, or at the very least, committing the Lake Herman Road murders, the murders of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. Then he goes quiet for about 7 months. Then the Blue Rock Springs shooting happens where Darlene Ferrin is murdered, and the Zodiac makes a phone call on July 5th of 1969 at 12:40 a.m. saying that he is responsible for it. Then, on September 27th of 1969, we have the Lake Berryessa stabbing, and ultimately on October 11th of 1969, we have the murder of Paul Stein, the taxi driver. So, what John Douglas is going to look at is there some type of specific reason why these people are targeted? And his ultimate conclusion is no, that the Zodiac wants to be a murderer, and he doesn't specifically care about who he is killing, and the phraseology that is used in the book is that the victims are the last thing on his mind. The victims are the last thing that are important to him. He just has this motive to kill. And some of you saw over the weekend, I uploaded an MSNBC documentary to this channel, an episode of Criminal Mindscape, which was about the serial killer Joseph Paul Franklin, who was the racist killer. And it features an interview with Joseph Paul Franklin and a psychological profiler named Mary O'Toole, who worked with the FBI. And as I said, John Douglas was the biggest pioneer in FBI profiling, and you can see how even some phrases from his book, The Cases That Haunt Us, were used in her presentation on Joseph Paul Franklin, because firstly, Joseph Paul Franklin is also a Zodiac killer suspect, the suspect of Sam Fisher, who provided me with that documentary, but she's even saying the exact same thing about him. The victims are the last thing on his mind. The victims are the last thing that is important to him. His objective is to kill. And I think with the Zodiac, it's the exact same thing, that this person has a plan to commit murders and use the murders as a way to draw attention to this type of persona that he has created. And with the Bates murder, we don't really see the creation of a persona yet. And I mean, even if you look at the Riverside confession, which I was just discussing, saying she was young and beautiful, but now she is battered and dead. Miss Bates was stupid. She went to the slaughter like a lamb. I tampered with her car. I pulled the distributor wire out. And I'm not sick. I'm insane. Yes, that person is confessing to the murder, and he's giving and sharing the story of how he committed the murder, and that he put on this ruse to lure Sherry Jo Bates somewhere, and he attacked her. But he's not creating a persona, and this is very different than the Zodiac killer of the late 1960s. But what do you think about any of John Douglas's observations about the murder of Sherry Jo Bates? What do you think about his assessment of how the killer knew Sherry Jo Bates, but it was not somebody who was a direct or personal ex-lover, that type of thing? It was not an ex-boyfriend. It was not somebody like Bob Barnett. It was just somebody who had some basic forms of familiarity with her, knowing her name and knowing where she was on campus, and that would be the extent of it. Those words aren't included in the book, but that's my overall take on the subject. And if you want to follow along with all of these Zodiac Killer discussions, as well as True Crime Talk Radio, and on Wednesdays I do a segment about Jack the Ripper, and on Fridays I do one about D.B. Cooper, and you want to follow along with all of this, you can hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And you can also go through some of the links in the description box. One of them is for BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNed88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. And I am trying to make a very strong effort to use all of the funds from BuyMeACoffee.com to purchase true crime books to talk to you guys about here on Black Box Online Radio. One of them I was just talking to you about, The Cases That Haunt Us by John Douglas, and on the Friday episode about D.B. Cooper, I just did a book discussion on Still Missing, Rethinking the D.B. Cooper Case by Ross Richardson. So once again, that's where the funds are going to be going if you drop something in the BuyMeACoffee.com cup. Now, there is a theory out there that the Zodiac killer of the 1960s was also the Golden State Killer. And yes, that person whom I had to ban was named Lisa, who's a supporter of that theory that the Zodiac Killer and Joseph D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, are the same person. There are also two books out there by Ann Penn, which I've been talking to you about on the Zodiac Killer news reports for the past couple weeks. What If, Golden State Killer Zodiac Solved, and Serial Slaughter Zodiac Killer. Those are the books by Ann Penn. The reason why I've been talking about this theory recently is because I have found that there's a small group of people who endorse this theory, and they started showing up in the comments section on Black Box Online Radio. From time to time, that happens with this channel. Last December, for example, there was a group of people who believed that Jack Torrance was the Zodiac Killer, and they just started popping up in different episodes and leaving a bunch of comments. So that's why they've taken up so much attention. But in 2021, I started the Zodiac Killer Debunking series, where I would talk about suspects whom I think were absolutely not the Zodiac Killer, or at the very least, there was a very low chance that they were the Zodiac who committed the murders in 1968 and 69, as well as the creator of the letters and ciphers. So I would like to add Joseph D'Angelo to the Debunking series, and instead of making a standalone episode, I would like to just talk about it right now here on the Zodiac Killer News Report. And someone else also left a comment, not Lisa, but a different person who supports the theory, by saying that the reason why so many people have a closed mind to Joseph D'Angelo being the Zodiac Killer, and the reason why so many people are opposed to this theory, is because they are looking at superficial MO comparisons. And I could not disagree more. They aren't superficial MO comparisons, modus operandi. They are deep-rooted ones. They are almost deep currents that are just running through the entire story. And let's just go through all of the reasons. Firstly, the Zodiac killer of the 1960s who committed the murders that I listed off at the beginning was a power-assertive serial killer, and the Golden State Killer was a sexually motivated predator. Completely different types of behavior, and moreover, their actions also are just completely different in the sense that there aren't the signatures of the Zodiac Killer found in the crimes of the Golden State Killer. Yeah, you might find something like at the Lake Berryessa stabbing, the Zodiac Killer tied up Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, and the Golden State Killer also tied up the victims, right? Well, here's a big difference. A preferred method of the Golden State Killer was that he would take shoelaces and pre-tie them into restraints that he would use on the victims, but the Zodiac at Lake Berryessa used pre-cut lengths of rope which are similar to plastic clothesline, so that signature just isn't present. And furthermore, the Zodiac Killer wore a hooded costume at Lake Berryessa, and the Golden State Killer wore more or less a similar ski mask, something similar to a ski mask when he was committing the murders and the rapes. And that might sound like a very simple issue, but it's not in terms of profiling. And I would like to cite Dr. Lee Meller for a lot of this because he's the one who listed everything off in a clear and cogent manner, because there's a twofold reason why the Zodiac Killer wore a hooded costume at Lake Berryessa. One reason is because he wanted to conceal his identity. That's the MO factor of this. But the Zodiac also wore the hooded costume because of signature. It had the Zodiac Killer symbol on it. It had the circle with the cross going through with it. Some people call it the crosshairs. It had the Zodiac's symbol on the hooded costume. That is a signature. And the Golden State Killer just did not do that. And there aren't any witness sightings that I can think of the Zodiac, or the Golden State Killer rather, wearing a ski mask that had this type of Zodiac Killer symbol on it. Again, these types of details and esoteric Zodiac language and symbols just are not found in the crimes by the Zodiac Killer. And if we're just going to talk about the reasons why I don't think these two people are the same person, that is one of the biggest reasons. Let's look at the language that was used by the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac is saying things to the effect of, I like killing people because it's so much fun. It's more fun than hunting wild game in the forest. He's saying that he is hunting people for sport. Whereas the Golden State Killer, again, he's a rapist. He's a sexually motivated predator. And he also just wants to terrorize and burglarize people's houses. He is hardly hunting people for sport so that he can die and be reborn in paradise, and those whom he has killed will be his slaves. So that's another strike. Also, you can look at the other symbols that the Zodiac was using. Symbolic language, I mean. The Zodiac is saying stuff to the effect of, I am the murderer of the two teenagers at Lake Herman last Christmas and the girl on the 4th of July. He's also saying stuff that if you go 1 mile east on the Columbus Parkway, you'll find someone shot with a 9mm Luger. I'm the one who did it. And most importantly, at Lake Berryessa, when the Zodiac was having an extended conversation with Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, he made up this wild ruse about saying that he was an escaped convict from Montana, he killed a prison guard, and he's trying to get to Mexico. The stories of the Golden State Killer operating are that, number one, he didn't talk in a bizarre way. He talked through clenched teeth. This is something that is very specific, why it was so difficult for them to identify his voice, because he was talking through clenched teeth, and he would say stuff like, fuck you, I'm gonna kill you. Fuck you, I'm gonna kill you. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And most famously during one incident, he was saying, I hate you, Bonnie, I hate you, Bonnie, I hate you, Bonnie. He would repeat himself over and over again, using very distinct types of words, or he's just muttering curse words and things about very simple sentences such as I hate you, whereas the Zodiac is telling big, wild, elaborate stories. And here is just my 2 cents on the subject. Here's something that I genuinely think about the Zodiac Killer. I do believe that the Zodiac was disguising his voice. One of the reasons why people think about the Zodiac talking with the unusual speaking cadence, or he didn't have an accent but he was talking in a bizarre way, I think that it was just the killer disguising his voice. He's creating a persona, he's playing a character, he's altering his voice because he's in Zodiac mode. But he's not talking through clenched teeth or saying, don't move or I'll kill you. He's not altering his voice that way. He's actually just lowering his register, and he's talking in a deeper but disguised voice, whereas the Golden State Killer is all just about rage. And here's something else, though. This is a different type of comparison between the Zodiac and the Golden State Killer. The Golden State Killer did not leave fingerprints behind. In a lot of ways, the Golden State Killer was a lot more meticulous than the Zodiac Killer of the 1960s. Meticulous when it came to not leaving fingerprints. He was absolutely sloppy about leaving his DNA behind because he didn't know about DNA in 1973, 74, and into the early 1980s. He wasn't concerned about it, and that was ultimately his downfall and how he was identified. But with the Zodiac, he left partial fingerprints behind. It's possible that the Zodiac left a partial palm print on the payphone that was used after the murder of Darlene Ferrin, if that actually was the killer. Now, it's possible the Zodiac didn't leave any fingerprints behind, but a lot of people believe that they do indeed have the Zodiac killer's fingerprints. And the Zodiac was somebody who was not wearing gloves all the time. He provided the explanation that he coated his fingers with airplane cement, and that's how he was able to conceal the fingerprints. But this is something else that I think people might disagree with. Number one, I said that the Golden State Killer was much more meticulous when it came to not leaving fingerprints, which I attribute to his law enforcement training. He was part of an anti-burglary task force, and he was using the knowledge and experiences from that task force on his victims. Terrible, disgusting things. The Golden State Killer was a disgusting person. He is a disgusting person, but he's behind bars now, thank goodness. And as far as the way that the Zodiac is acting, he is somebody who was a lot less confrontational. He's not as meticulous and cold, methodical, and calculating as the Golden State Killer, but he's less confrontational with the victims. Because the sources that I would like to cite for this discussion here are, of course, Paul Holes, and I've watched a couple interviews with him. There was also a video out there from Veritasium. I thought the channel was called Veritaserum the whole time I was watching this, but then the host did a little promo at the end and said it's Veritasium. And there's also a documentary out there called Unmasking the Killer that was made before D'Angelo was identified as the Zodiac, and this is just where I'm getting this material from. But Paul Holes was talking about 3 particular murders. One of them was the double homicide of Brian and Katie Maggiore, and this is when Brian Maggiore was actually an MP, military police, and he confronted the Golden State Killer. He almost cornered him, and then the Golden State Killer resorted to murdering him because he just simply didn't want to get captured, and then he ran around and murdered Katie Maggiore. And this sounds absolutely not like the Zodiac Killer at all. The Zodiac Killer didn't create these types of opportunities. The Zodiac Killer did not put himself in positions when these types of confrontations would happen to the point where he has to resort to killing somebody. The Zodiac is murdering people because it is his sole and primary intent. The Golden State Killer primary intent was power and sexual gratification. Absolutely not like the Zodiac, not at all. And the third one that I would like to talk about is the murder of Gregory Sanchez. And this is again one where the Golden State Killer gets into a physical fight with a guy. The Golden State Killer was about 5 feet 10 inches tall, and the victim, Gregory Sanchez, was 6'3", and the Golden State Killer shot him and then was able to fight him off after he was already injured, and ultimately Gregory Sanchez passed away. Again, this is a larger guy, a larger male, who is trying to fight back and will accost him to prevent him from getting away. The Golden State Killer is committing these crimes out of desperation, whereas the Zodiac is committing these crimes because of a specific desire to kill, everything that I've already laid out, committing the murders to draw attention to himself so he can use this persona in the letters. Now, the Golden State Killer did kill for other reasons. He murdered at least 12 people, some believe 13, and then the people like Ann Penn think he murdered 200 people. Yes, the Golden State Killer killed for a couple reasons. I just wanted to point out 3 case examples about where murder was the motive only because this guy wanted to get away. He wants to avoid capture. The Golden State Killer was a ransacker, he was a burglar, he was a rapist. None of that stuff is found in the Zodiac Killer's activities. I mean, these are just so extraordinarily different. So really, I think that the Golden State Killer gets a 2 out of 10 as a suspect rating for the following reasons. Number 1, he gets 1 point. Well, I mean, there's no 0, so everybody gets 1 point. But he gets 1 point because he is a convicted murderer who was in Northern California. Alright, so that's one thing. And the second one is his physical parameters aren't completely off. I think maybe he was in better shape in 1968 and 69 than the Zodiac killer of the Bay Area would have been, but 2 out of 10, and that's being generous. The ultimate answer is almost certainly not. But what do you think about any of these observations that I've made about the Zodiac killer and the Golden State Killer? And what is your response to the theory that the Zodiac and the Golden State Killer were one and the same? Now, in this episode, I told you guys that I was going to be talking about a proposed solution to the Zodiac's Z32 cipher. Here's something else. So where are the ciphers from the Golden State Killer? Where are the more complex and intricate ciphers that would have been created years later? So I digress from that. But here is a possible solution that has been laid out from an individual named Sphere the Cube, also known as Sphery. And I just want to say something before I start this segment. If anybody gets an A for effort, it's Sphere the Cube, because he has made a lot of observations about the Zodiac Killer mystery, which he shares on his Facebook page using that name, Sphere the Cube. But he has his own suspect, Robert Volvins. However, Sphery's observations go well beyond just, okay, this person was the Zodiac. He's also talked a lot about the Zodiac Killer's letters and ciphers, as well as the motives and reasons why this person would want to commit the crimes. And the Zodiac Killer threatened to detonate a bomb that he was going to use. It's almost, well, it is an act of domestic terrorism. And one place that might have been the proposed location for the bomb, according to Sphere the Cube, was the Oakland Coliseum. And it is now baseball season. And I'm going to share something with you guys that 3 of my favorite baseball stadiums are Guaranteed Rate Field, actually, on the south side of Chicago. I like this one because I happen to enjoy peppermints. No, I'm not joking. Another one is Fenway Park. Even if you don't like the Boston Red Sox, you can still appreciate Fenway Park and the Green Monster for the sake of history. And the third one is the Oakland Coliseum, which will be discussed as a possible location for the Zodiac Killer's bomb. And I would like to look at the solution that has been proposed by Sphere the Cube to the Zodiac Killer's final cipher, the Z32. And the Z32 has 32 symbols, and Sphere has written out by first base dugout, athletic bullpen. And another possible way to read this would be hid in the bullpen. But the one that's written in white, by first base dugout, athletic bullpen, referring to the Oakland Coliseum. And the Zodiac Killer talked about how he was going to clue people in on the location of the bomb by using the Z32 cipher. And the Oakland Coliseum is 18 miles from a place called Mount Diablo. The Zodiac said that it concerned Mount Diablo and radians and inches along the radians. Or at the very least, he clued people into the location of Mount Diablo, and he said concerns radians and inches along the radians. And Mount Diablo and the Oakland Coliseum are not so far apart. But there's another reason why Sphere has been looking at the Oakland Coliseum and the dugout as a possible location for the bomb. And it says that, well, there is something that I haven't discussed a lot on BlackBoxOnlineRadio, and it relates to the Oakland A's tickets that were mailed in 1970. And this is something that perhaps people are not incorporating into a lot of Zodiac Killer discussions. Mike Morford has talked about them in relation to his Zodiac Killer suspect, William McDuff Andrew. And thank you to Sphere also for sharing the police report for the Oakland A's tickets that were mailed in 1970 that were allegedly from the Zodiac. And it says, Barbara Taggart is the name of the person receiving them, June 19th, 1970. While searching for a missing boy in the area of a Little League baseball park, they were contacted by Barbara Taggart, who was born in 1939 and lived on 1423 Rolene Drive. Taggart stated that she received in the mail a letter addressed to Gerald Taggart, 1423 Rolene Drive, bearing a June 18th Vallejo postmark. The letter contained 2 tickets to the Oakland baseball game for June 20th. The tickets were wrapped in a piece of paper with the words, Gift from Zodiac. To get started, she knows no one that would send such a letter to her residence, and they were unable to question Taggart further due to R.O., responding officer, being on detail at the time. Taggart was advised to contact the investigator after 8 p.m. on this date. The letter was kept by the responding officer and tagged in evidence. And the A's were actually playing the Chicago White Sox that day, and the pitcher on the mound would have been Chuck Dobson, who had a 6-6 record, and the White Sox pitcher was Barry Moore, who had a 3-5 record. And I told you guys that Guaranteed Rate Field was one of my favorite ballparks. That is where the White Sox play. And the Oakland Coliseum was also one of my favorite ones due to its just sheer massive size. I remember watching it on the TV as a kid, and I was just thinking, wow, that is so much larger than a lot of the other ballparks out there. I would love to just sit up in some of the high-end bleacher seats or something like that, or just sit at the top of the Oakland Coliseum and just watch a game and just be the only person out there and just kind of wave to the camera crew because they knew I would be up there by myself. Kids think about weird things. But Spheri has also pointed out that there are a lot of geometric connections to the Zodiac Killer, and one thing that I remember during one of my conversations with Spheri was that he stated that the Zodiac is giving people instructions on how to find the location of the bomb that he was planning to detonate, the stuff that I've already told you guys about, sending in the Mount Diablo code, sending in the Phillips 66 map, saying set to magnetic north, concerns radians and inches along the radians. And Spheri also noticed that not a lot of people were following the instructions. So by putting the angles on top of Mount Diablo, they could connect to different geographic locations, and one of them could be the Oakland Coliseum where the bomb would be detonated. And also, Siri has some larger drawings on how he believes that certain parts of the certain crime scenes in the Zodiac Killer's locations could be connected to the set of angles as well, and that there are a lot of mathematical reasons about how and why the Zodiac chose to design everything. And one more time, if you would like to hear more about his observations, you can follow him on Facebook at Sphere the Cube, and his proposed solution to the Z32 cipher is by first base dugout, athletic bullpen. And I would like to move on to the next segment here on the Zodiac Killer News Report, and I would like to give a shout out to the YouTube channel Brindle Brenda, which has done a very interesting video on the murder of Paul Stein, and the person who was hosting the video was not Brindle Brenda, and I don't know his name, but he said that he was not her, of course, because, his name was not Brenda, obviously. He was just borrowing her YouTube channel. I think the exact word that he was using was hijacking her YouTube channel. And he did a very interesting walkthrough of the murder of Paul Stein, and he seemed very familiar with the case. But one detail that he had shared was when he said that the murder of Paul Stein was witnessed by two teenagers across the street, the two kids they're sometimes referred to as Lindsay and Rebecca Robbins, and they're watching this from the window in their house. And he stated that there was a quotation from Rebecca Robbins where she could see the killer raising a knife and stabbing Paul Stein, and he didn't believe that that was true because Paul Stein was murdered and the Zodiac cut off a piece of Paul Stein's shirt and mailed it in with future Zodiac correspondences. And I am not exactly familiar with that part of the story, and I've, heard a lot about the murder of Paul Stein over the years, but I fully confess that I don't know everything. Instead, the story that I heard was one that was documented by Jim Dean when he interviewed Lindsay Robbins, and there's a quotation from Lindsay Robbins. That's not Rebecca Robbins, that's Lindsay Robbins, the other witness, who stated that he could see the glint of the knife as the Zodiac was cutting something in Paul Stein's taxi, which they have since learned was Paul Stein's bloody shirt. But I just hadn't encountered this particular detail before, that Rebecca Robbins reported that she could see the killer apparently or seemingly stabbing Paul Stein. But other than that, it was a very well done video, and it really showed a lot of nice walkthroughs in the area. And the next person I would like to give a shout out to is Mason Hilliard, who made a video about the Swindle murders in 1964. Some people believe that the Zodiac's first crime was the murder of Sherry Jo Bates in 1966, as stated, but some people think that the Zodiac started operating in 1962 or 63, or maybe 1964 with the murders of Johnny Ray and Joyce Swindle, and Mason Hilliard made a video that was mostly done as a resource under the title of Ocean Beach Sniper. One more time, Ocean Beach Sniper here on YouTube, and it mostly wanted to show the seascapes and the terrain and the photos of the crime scenes, as well as sharing some of the original news coverage from reporters interviewing detectives about the murders of Johnny Ray and Joyce Swindle, a crime that didn't seem like it had an extremely clear motive. But if you would like to watch that or just get a look at the area where Johnny Ray and Joyce Swindle was killed, that is over on Mason Hilliard's channel. And the next thing that I would like to do is get to your supporter shoutouts. And one more time, you can use buymeacoffee.com/blackboxned88, and that allows you to make a donation or contribution to help the show. And anyone who makes the donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. And you can also use these super thanks here on YouTube. And our first one comes to us from Batman66. Batman66, thank you so much for your regular and consistent support. You've really helped the channel out a lot, not only that way, but also by sharing information that is used for the shorts that come out Monday through Friday here on Black Box Online Radio. I release shorts here on YouTube, but also on Facebook and Instagram. My Facebook name is Ned DeHaan, and on Instagram, BlackBoxNed88. And our next one comes to us from River Prawn Pottery. You two guys have been absolutely amazing. Thank you for contributing every week. It means a lot to me. And then we have one from Ray Grant. Ray Grant joined one of the live streams last week, and he was, welcome back to the channel. Ray Grant and I have had a lot of interactions over the years. He's also been a guest on this program, and you can find that under the episode Ray Grant and Ned DeHaan Talk True Crime. And I just want to say that I appreciate all the comments that Ray has put in, and, he is welcome to come back and join any of the future live streams. But he contributed on BuyMeACoffee.com. Thank you so much to Ray Grant. And next we have one to Dennis G. Dennis G has been sharing a lot of the images that are used for Black Box Online Radio, the images that you see going by on the screen. And it's not only does he share the images, but he has also sent in a lot of stories that will be used for posts in the community section. I'm also trying to release posts here on YouTube 7 days a week, every single day, and some of them are going to contain small true crime stories, and Dennis G has been helping a lot with that, so thank you so much to him. And you can also hit the like button and subscribe one more time, not only to follow along with all of the videos, but to follow the community section. Lots of true crime content here on Black Box Online Radio, and one more time, going live every Tuesday and Thursday, True Crime Talk Radio in the morning, with me, Black Box Ned. And one more shout out, and that actually goes to Vincent McConnell, and he is the one who runs the channel New Cokes 2024. And he has a documentary out there called New Cokes. That's, I guess, why he chose to name the channel. Actually, I'm not sure which came first, the chicken or the egg. Maybe Vincent can share that in the comments section. Was the channel named New Cokes and then he made the documentary named New Cokes? Or was it vice versa? But he has a documentary out there called New Cokes. And I've known about this for some time, but I decided to give it a watch. I was a little bit hesitant because the description read that nuclear weapons are a fear porn scam, and it's getting into some of the territory of conspiracy theories. And as I said, I was hesitant to watch something like that. I'm curious about that subject, but I really know nothing about those types of conspiracy theories involving nuclear weapons. But it turned out that was only the first 2 minutes of the documentary, and then it got into the true crime content, talking about the Zodiac killer. Vincent has a suspect named Arthur Lee Allen, and he also releases a lot of Zodiac killer videos on his channel, New Cokes 2024. But the documentary also talks about other true crime stories, such as the Lindbergh baby, the Son of Sam, Maury Terry and the Ultimate Evil. Even Sammy the Bull Gravano made a small appearance. And if you look down in the quick reference section that is pinned here in the comments, I will include a link to Vincent McConnell's documentary, New Cokes 2024. And as I said, he's going to start with the Zodiac killer material very early on in there. I know a lot of people always want to hear more about the Zodiac killer, but this is a different type of documentary because it is a blend of true crime content with comedy and humor, as well as music. And I've been very critical of a lot of these things in the past. In 2018 and 2019, it became quite popular for people to be true crime comedians. There are lots of true crime comedy podcasts out there. I don't really know if those things are still popular anymore. I really stopped watching them as soon as I found them because I found that they were just making a mockery of the situation. And to the credit of Vincent McConnell, he didn't do any of that. Yes, there is humor and comedy in his documentary, New Cokes, but it's not making light of the victim's suffering, and he's not making fun of the victims at all. So overall, I found it to be very entertaining, and there's a lot of good music in that. One more time, you can click the link down below for New Cokes on the New Cokes 2024 channel. And lastly, I would like to share something with you guys that I was watching in a podcast interview on Lex Friedman's channel, and he was actually interviewing Kevin Spacey. Kevin Spacey is an actor who was mostly canceled by Hollywood. He was one of the most famous actors in Hollywood, two-time Oscar winner. He also did the show House of Cards, and he was one of the first people that was truly taken down by the Me Too movement. And one of the reasons why Lex Friedman had him on his podcast, well, one of the most famous podcast that is done on YouTube, let's say one of the most famous ones that is done in the interview format, is because he was found not guilty or acquitted of all of the charges. But I guess it's somewhat more acceptable to talk about Kevin Spacey now. And last week on the channel, I was talking about David Fincher in the 2007 Zodiac film. David Fincher also directed the film Seven, which starred Kevin Spacey, and Kevin Spacey played a serial killer. Serial killer named John Doe. It's the movie that has the famous scene with Brad Pitt, "What's in the box? What's in the box?" And I don't like to give away any type of movie spoilers, but Kevin Spacey did a very, very good job, and it was one of the most well-received performances where an actor is playing a serial killer in recent times, by recent times meaning the last 30 years. And one thing that was in Kevin Spacey's mind when he was creating this was that, I mean, Lex Friedman just openly asked him, how did you prepare for a role like that, playing a serial killer? And the long and short of it was, after some conversations with David Fincher, there were two things that he had to keep in mind. Number one was, you are going to win. Number two was, you are in control at all times. And I think that this stood out to me just like the Zodiac Killer. I thought of the Zodiac Killer instantly. And it's not only because I do Zodiac Monday, it's because there are a lot of these serial killer elements that are seen in multiple serial killers all up and down the spectrum. John Douglas talks about it all the time in the book The Cases That Haunt Us. I also mentioned the Criminal Mindscape documentary that's available on this channel. You can see it for yourself. Number one, you are going to win. Number two, you are in control at all times. Because I think the Zodiac Killer was thinking and acting like that in the same way. He was not doing this to get caught. He wasn't playing this game of how he just actually wants to set up his own failure and his own demise. He was trying to stay out of prison. He wanted to win. This is the most dangerous game to him, but he's setting this up so that he can win. And as far as the thing about being in control, absolutely. The Zodiac was, what did I say? A power assertive serial killer. He's not even extremely focused on the murders. He wants to create the image of terror and fear for the Bay Area of San Francisco. He wants to humiliate the members of law enforcement, the pigs, the blue meanies. He wants to make them look bad and prove that he can get away with this. He wants to demonstrate that he is some type of a superior individual. He wants to be in control, and he wants to win. Absolutely, I thought of the Zodiac Killer instantly. And you might be thinking, well, that's any serial killer out there, right? No, not exactly. David Berkowitz, the son of Sam Shooter, most likely set up his own demise, and David Berkowitz got busted because he had a parking ticket that according to Manny Grossman, he got on purpose. And yes, Manny Grossman does actually have there's some commentary about him in the New Cokes documentary that is pinned down below. So there are also going to be serial killers that want to do things where they do get caught, mostly so they can just put an end to their miserable life outside of prison. They're going to be serial killers that are going to ultimately commit suicide, as well as leave confessions. And not everybody just wants to be in control at all times and wants to win. I think that most of them want control, but some of them just want to sabotage themselves. And I absolutely do not think that the Zodiac Killer wanted to do that. I think he just simply wanted to play this as a game, and he wanted to set this up as a game that he knew he was going to win. But what do you think about any of the ideas that I put forward in this episode? You can put your responses in the comment section down below. If you would like to challenge me on anything, please share some comments and feedback. And as I said, Engaging conversations and discussions are welcome. Harassment is not, but I think most of you know where the boundaries are. So please share your responses in the comments section down below. Please visit Vincent McConnell's documentary New Cokes 2024. That is pinned in the comments section. And that will be all for me now. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there is always BlackBoxNid88 over on Instagram. And I will see you over there. Goodbye.